chair of the coordinating committee for this event. I'd like to welcome you to this semester's Robert M. Pockrass Memorial Lecture. Dr. Pockrass was a member of the Penn State journalism faculty from 1948 until 1977. And the purpose of this lecture is to honor Dr. Pockrass's memory and his many contributions to the former School of Journalism, now College of Communications. The lecture has been endowed through scores of gifts contributed in his honor, including by Judith Hardis, who was a 1952 Penn State graduate. She also established the Hardis Endowed Fund for outstanding undergraduates majoring in women's, gender, and sexuality studies who have a strong interest in reproductive rights, health access, and in policy making related to women's health. So we want to thank Ms. Hardis for her support for this series. On behalf of the Pockrass Coordination Committee, Homero Gil-Dizaninga, Jess Myrick, Mary Beth Oliver, we'd also like to thank others for making this lectureship possible, including our Dean, Marie Harden, the Department Head of Film Production and Media Studies, Matt Jordan, and Shannon Brace, Leanne Kimball, and Steve Samsel of the Belisario College of Communications. This year's Pockrass speaker, or this semester's Pockrass speaker, is Dr. Emily West, Professor of Communication and Graduate Program Director in the Department of Communication at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Dr. West has written about a variety of media, consumer, and promotional culture phenomena, including the cultural meanings of greeting cards, activism against extreme media organizations, Canadian national identity, the gendered politics of cheerleading, reality television shows, and consumer ideology in U.S. healthcare. Her books include two that she co-edited with me, the Routledge Companions to Advertising and Promotional Culture, and so I know firsthand that Dr. West is a dream collaborator, an amazing work ethic, innovative and insightful, calm in the face of pressure, and attends to fine detail. Our contributors praised her editing skills, and whenever the books got behind our deadlines, it was always my fault, never hers. She was always on time. Her recent authored book, Buy Now, How Amazon Branded Convenience and Normalized Monopoly, is a pointed and detailed interrogation of Amazon and its implications for consumption, labor relations and equity, distribution strategies, monopolistic practices, and as a consumer and media brand. One review of her book wrote, West has written a perceptive, approachable, and sophisticated book that unboxes Amazon's brand to show how the whole of the company may be more impactful than the sum of its parts. Another reviewer concluded, an important addition to the ongoing scholarly work on the distribution of media and material goods, Buy Now is a thoroughly researched case study of the many facets of one company that has become one of the faces of larger trends in both the monopolization of distribution and the commodification of culture. Yeah. Look right here. The title of her talk today is Platform Power and the Manufacture of Public Trust. Please welcome Dr. Emily West.
Thank you so much, Matt, for that super kind introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here at Penn State. I went to graduate school in Pennsylvania and never made it to Penn State, which is crazy, so I finally made it. What a beautiful campus and vibrant town you have right on your doorstep there of campus. And it's really amazing to come and meet some old friends and colleagues, but also to make new ones today. So yes, it's especially nice to be introduced by Matt because we are now somewhat longtime collaborators on the Routledge Companions, and lucky me to have such a great co-editor, and lucky you to have such a great professor and colleague. It's really an honor to be delivering this semester's Pockrass lecture. So we heard a bit about that faculty member, and I understand that part of what he specialized in is public opinion and popular culture. And I think actually that fits kind of nicely with my remarks today, that we'll think about popularity and how affection and popularity in digital platform brands has been inspired among publics, and the consequences of that trust and affection for the present moment. So speaking of the present moment, it's a tough one. I think that's true in higher education, for researchers, for immigrant communities, for trans people on our campuses and beyond, and for those committed to a vision of democracy that includes the participation and voice of all publics and respect for the rule of law. So I feel called to meet this moment while securing the knowledge that I will fail. But nevertheless, I think this moment requires that I reflect on why the power of platforms matters, and why it does deserve our attention amidst a lot of competing things right now. So today I'm going to focus on the ways that digital platforms have secured our consent to their cultural, economic, and political power. So in this, the year 2025, I think actually power through force is in vogue. But I'm going to be considering the ways that digital platforms acquired power by securing consent for their ubiquity, their market dominance, their evolution into essential infrastructure, and their unprecedented collection and profit from personal data. So in other words, how did the power of digital platforms become hegemonic? And turning our attention to the public, what role have we as publics played in offering our consent? So I think it's a question worth asking, because where consent is offered, or trust is won, or affection is expressed, it can also be withdrawn. And I'm not blaming the victim here. Like in all hegemonic processes, consent was won or extracted very intentionally, and with the support of billions in investment capital and the brightest minds that flocked to Silicon Valley. So that's why I want to draw attention to the ways I think that public trust in digital platforms was manufactured, with apologies and due credit to Herman and Chomsky, whose book Manufacturing Consent inspired my title today, and I think just more broadly, ways of thinking about this state of affairs. So, Herman and Chomsky considered how the systems of ownership and funding of the mass media were structurally designed to create journalism and storytelling that upheld the status quo of capitalism and establishment politics. In turn, I'm going to consider how the structural logics of digital platforms, the relationships they built with users, and the particularities of the historical moment in which they emerged secured consent for their rapid rise to global market dominance. And I think this is a rise that was facilitated in no small part by how we as users welcomed these platforms into our most intimate thoughts and spaces, illustrated by the way that smart speakers, for example, like Amazon's Echo, reside on many a bedside table. So before I proceed, though, I'm going to talk about, what is a platform, and what is platform power. So a digital platform, I'm going to define as a company that functions as a digital intermediary, connecting buyers and sellers, audiences and advertisers, creators and audiences, or any other combination of two or more types of actors who seek some kind of exchange or interaction. So there's long been businesses that have this kind of connecting intermediary model, but there are really significant advantages when this function goes online into a platformized environment. So think of a retail store. It connects manufacturers or distributors of goods with consumers who want to buy them. But if the store wants to sell a lot more goods, or it wants to reach a lot more customers, it has to invest in this very capital-intensive building up of more stores, more employees, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas when Amazon opens its stores in 1995, it can immediately reach a national market. And even as it started to build and expand the number of products it sold and the volume, and it did have to have some capital investments in warehousing or more power to keep the site running. It was much, much less than it would have been to have to build a ton more stores. So this is true even for Amazon, which actually still moves a lot of stuff through physical space. But it's even more true for digital-only businesses, where the scaling possibilities are much greater, like for Meta, right, that deals primarily in the construction of social media platforms and the sale of targeted digital advertising to its users. So in addition then, platform businesses collect essentially rents from the exchanges or interactions on the platforms that others create and provide, whether that's content that they post, services they provide, or products that they create and ship. So after creating the digital infrastructure in which these exchanges or interactions can take place, the platform can sit back and just take their cut. And then as the exchanges and interactions scale, their revenues grow. And if and when they essentially control the market in which they operate, being either the only game in town or a place that creators or sellers just can't afford to be invisible on, then the platform is well positioned to extract greater rents, raise prices, and generally demand more favorable terms. Now, one more thing about being a platform is that as the intermediary in a digital business, the platform is collecting detailed information about every user, every interaction, every exchange. These data, coined at one point as the new oil, can not only be used to enhance the platform's core business, but serve as the foundation for lucrative new businesses, such as the way Amazon uses its unparalleled data on consumer behavior to now sell a lot of digital advertising products. Or the way that social media platforms are now leveraging all the content, uploaded by billions of users over many years now to train large language AI models, which obviously is the new thing of the moment. And it's not like this is the first time that platform companies have realized that their digital exhaust can actually have tremendous value. It's been at the core of their rapid expansions and ability to attract kind of disproportionate investment dollars. So this can help us understand how a company like Amazon, within 20 years, could go from we sell some books online to we sell all the things online. We do fulfillment, we do last mile delivery, we have digital devices, we have an AI assistant, we're a publisher, we're a streamer, we're a film and television production company. Also, we have brick and mortar grocery stores and convenience stores, proprietary brands of many household goods, and cloud services. And obviously, the list goes on. So it's that the role of data and then the sort of disproportionate investment capital that allows something like that to happen. So there's other types of platforms, but today I'm focusing on the types of consumer-facing digital platform businesses that we've come to know as big tech. And these companies have become tremendously powerful in such a short amount of time. This is an image of companies by their market capitalization just a week or so ago. And we can see dominated here by American technology companies. 20 years ago, it was all these other kinds of industries. Microsoft was the only one in the top 6 there. That was a tech company. Yes, a tech company. There's other ways that we could think about the economic power of digital platforms, such as their dominance, the control they have of the markets in which they operate. So let's think, for example, about Meta and Google, that are essentially digital advertising companies. Together, they collect almost half of all US digital ad revenues. The top 5 are collecting about 2/3. And this is the core of the revenue system that powers our online information environment. I think some measures of monopolistic power are even more striking than this, like Google search being an estimated 90% of all searches. So that dominance of search, along with the tactics that Google used to achieve and maintain it, led to last year's Department of Justice decision against Google. So one of the proposed consequences of saying, yes, Google, you are a monopolist and you did it illegally, is that they might have to sell off their Chrome browser, but I guess it's not finalized, so stay tuned on that. So this level of economic power both makes possible and has made it possible by significant political power. So this is true in terms of all the types of typical political power that large corporations would have, like lobbying and cozy relationships with politicians and regulators. But in a way, these relationships aren't just cozy, they're really inextricable. If you think about the extent to which these large companies are providing essential communication and computing services to governments at all levels, For example, really large contracts to provide cloud computing to the Pentagon and federal law enforcement agencies. So these things are just really hard to tease apart now. It's also true that these companies have tremendous political power because of their powers of governance. That, having monopolistic platforms becomes akin to being essential infrastructure, as phrased by former FTC Chair Lina Khan. And I think an example that brings this point to life is the way that Google's Android and Apple's iOS app platforms are the primary drivers of governing how and whether apps collect personal data and engage in location tracking. So this can create tremendous frustration for apps that have to please these gatekeepers that largely determine whether their app will reach a critical mass of users. And then it also leaves these high stakes questions around privacy and surveillance largely in the hands of these two private corporations. For example, there's been a lot of concern over the years about third-party cookies, and that is a sort of a way that the digital ad market works across the internet. And it seemed like the third-party cookie was dead because Google was going to get rid of it. And then last year, Google said, no, we're not getting rid of it. And so now, the regulatory environment is like completely unprepared to say, oh, well, nothing's happening with third-party cookies. And so I think, US regulators and others who care about privacy are a bit caught off guard. I think a notable moment, which I hate to bring up, but when the governance of platforms came to light and was even celebrated by many, was in the wake of the insurrection on the Capitol building on January 6, 2021, which was an attempt to disrupt the counting of elector votes and the peaceful transition of power. And really, very shortly after this, one after another, the social media and app platforms deplatformed Donald Trump and some of the organizations that had organized and championed the insurrection in the name of Stop the Steal. Amazon Web Services, which provides the cloud computing at the foundation of a great deal of the internet, deplatformed the social media platform Parler due to the violent content on its site, which they certainly noticed violated AWS's terms of service. And then so did the Apple and Android app stores. So you couldn't get it on the internet, you couldn't, on the web, I should say, you couldn't get it via app. So those bans were eventually lifted, and the long-term impact on Donald Trump's fortunes, as well as that of the Stop the Steal narrative, may have been a net positive rather than a negative, hindsight being 2020. But the incident nevertheless illustrated the political power of these newly essential information distribution infrastructures. So allow me to sloganize this idea by plagiarizing a quote. So this is a quote that George Gerbner, who's known in theory for cultivation theory, he had a career-long quest to demonstrate the political power of the themes and patterns that endlessly repeat in the popular culture we consume. And he enjoyed quoting this person, Andrew Fletcher, who was a 17th century Scottish political philosopher and parliamentarian, who wrote, if a man were permitted to write all the ballads, he need not care who should make the laws of the nation. Ballads being the popular culture of the 16th and 17th century. So it's not a new concern. Concentration in the media industries predates the monopolization in tech that we see today. But I think it's newly relevant to observe that whoever monopolizes the distribution of information and culture need not care who should make the laws of the nation. So how did this happen? How did these companies go from scrappy startups in dorm rooms, research labs, and garages in the 1990s and early 2000s, really not that long ago, to titans of industry, commanding user bases larger than any nation or world religion, with unprecedented powers of governance given their status as providers of essential infrastructure at the level of software, but I think of hardware as well. This is a visual of the undersea cables that make the global internet possible. The blue ones are not from American big tech companies, but as time goes on from 2001 towards today, more and more actually being laid by these companies themselves. So the actual hardware as well. So how have they become so powerful? I think I've already talked about the logistical and technical reasons, just the way platforms work, the scalability, the generation of data commodities. political reasons. So especially in the neoliberal era of the 1990s and the early 2000s, just a real lack of appetite for regulation. Markets is how we're going to solve everything. And also, a halo effect from the apparent role and sometimes the real role that these platforms played in various democratization efforts and social movements. So that was a strong narrative. Economic reasons, so these companies come along and start growing really fast and a lot of frenzy of investment. So you see a tech boom economically as well as in terms of companies, exuberant investment without the requirement of profitability for a very long time. So that kind of gives them a real advantage against, in various business areas, competing against other companies that are not thought to be platforms in the same way. In addition, because of all this, irrational exuberance with investment, which was facilitated also by low interest rates, the low cost pricing for consumers. So we all got very used to getting things that were a great deal. You know what I mean? Like the Prime membership used to be $99, and Uber was consistently cheaper, and you're like, Netflix, which is a subscription, it barely costs anything. And then that has changed. And then the sense that the sharing and gig economies were exciting, new, flexible employment opportunities. So all these reasons. So I think that's kind of this time is the honeymoon period. It allowed these companies to grow quickly, bottom lines be damned, and do what it took to hook users on their services and enclose as much economic activity, communication, and information generated by the doings of daily life into these platforms as they could. They actually called this type of growth, like you gotta grow really fast, land grabs, rarely with any sense of irony or reflexivity around that term's colonial implications. So I think a lot of actually my research on Amazon came on what I would consider to be the tail end of the honeymoon period in the mid to late 2010s. And I think in addition to the logistical, technical, the political and economic reasons, I also want to draw attention to something that I looked at quite a bit as another set of reasons, which are cultural reasons. Techno-optimism, the appeal of shiny new things, and the way that these companies resonated with deep stories about American innovation and exceptionalism, which I think is there's still an element of that, and I think we're souring on it. So, when you heard a rallying cry like Mark Zuckerberg's alleged to have said, move fast and break things, that sounded more like a rallying cry and less like something aspirational and less sort of reckless and risky than we might see it now. So, the popular images, attitudes, and relationships that users have developed with these companies through their everyday usage, I think, is also a huge part of what gave them the leeway and cultural permission, if you will, to grow fast into monopolistic market dominance and significant political power, with pushback really coming rather late in the game. So this everyday affective relationship that people developed with tech brands is at the heart, so to speak, of my work on Amazon. Beyond Amazon's structural business advantages and the political economy of platforms, I wanted to understand how Amazon cultivated trust and intimacy with its users. Amazon has long been a widely loved and trusted company, or as I argue in the book, a highly affective brand. And I think when we normally think of brands that people love, we might think of very familiar product brands like Coca-Cola or Harley-Davidson or Nike, or entertainment brands like Marvel or the NFL. These are the brands that people buy merch of and voluntarily advertise on their bodies, or they get tattoos of. And that's not really true of Amazon. Amazon doesn't have merch per se. No one's getting Amazon smile tattoos, although if you hear of someone, let me know. But Amazon actually, for many years, has been ranked as one of the most loved and most trusted brands in the United States. And this is measured differently by different organizations, but really until very recently, it's been the #1 or in the top 5 most loved and trusted brands. And then this morning's consult is like a market research group. This is from 2023, which even is after the pandemic, when I think Amazon's image definitely did take a beating with the stories about dangerous working conditions in its warehouses at that time. So there's no honeymoon without the warm fuzzies. And even before Amazon was doing a lot of conventional advertising, it was bonding with its users through its ubiquity by placing the customer's convenience at the center of its business and making personalization central to the customer experience. And they achieved this personalization by watching and listening to the customer in order to customize service such as recommendations, anticipating problems, needs, and desires, deliveries and shipments. In other words, looking for ways to enhance Amazon's convenience to us. With the development of Alexa for use with the Amazon Echo smart speaker devices in 2014, this listening became literal, developing even into the ability to monitor tone of voice and therefore emotion and calibrate Alexa in response to that as part of Alexa's skill set for ever more personalized, responsive, and even anticipatory service. I've argued that Amazon actually has been quite happy to sort of explicitly link the surveillance that it does of its customers to its ability to provide convenient personal service. I call it surveillance as a service. And it's only become more possible with the proliferation of either Amazon branded or Amazon connected surveillance and smart home devices that you can outfit your home with. And the more products and services and time we spend with the services of any single platform company like Amazon or Google, the more convenient and personalized things become, as information gleaned in one interaction can shape customizations, recommendations, and even decisions made preemptively on our behalf by the platform brand in the name of convenience. And while we are enclosed in Amazon's platform embrace and experiencing its personalized services as a form of care, I argue that our sense of what it even means to be a consumer changes. So since we've moved into consumer capitalism, where it's our spending that is so central to the economy, we've generally thought of the consumer as a choosing subject. So the market provides an abundance of options, and then we are invited as consumers to create our identities, relate to others, and exert our consumer power via the mechanism of choice. And choice then is this key idea that actually kind of connects being a consumer with being a citizen. What I see in the relationship that Amazon and other digital platforms cultivate with users is a shift from a choosing subject to a served self. The served self prioritizes ease and seeks out products and services that are customized and personalized. They select from a limited menu of choices that have already anticipated their needs and preferences. So here the work of consumption, the labor of choice, gets absorbed by the brand as part of its service. The choosing subject does consumption in an active way, the served self in a more passive way. And as Amazon encourages us to spend more time, more consumption, more entertainment, more surveillance with its platforms, and to be guided by its recommendations and nudges of its search algorithms to select its Amazon's choice products over other options, to subscribe and save, so you can just make the decision once and not have to worry about it. Buy now with just one click from a product page when time is of the essence. All of this is sort of encouraging a served self approach to consumption. So I think it's a gradual shift from choosing subject to served self. It's subtle, it might be hard to perceive, but it's one of the distinctive costs of the convenience that Amazon offers. And Alexa is a powerful example of this strategy. So, in some sense, Alexa can make consumption hands-free if you're able to purchase or order things through the voice assistant. So you literally don't have to type or tap. But also the way voice works, kind of, the graphical interface allows maybe more options to be viewed, and that doesn't work as well with voice. So here's an example that shows how Amazon was encouraging people scripting Alexa skills. So this is how your company can be accessed via Alexa in ways that make choices for the user in the name of convenience. so it's all a little small, so I'll read it for you. So imagine that the user is going to ask Alexa, ask A to Z restaurants to order me some pepperoni and olive pizzas. Understandably, Alexa has questions like, how many pizzas? How big are these pizzas? What is the distribution of pepperoni and olives? So it would seem to make sense to do this thing on the right, which is to clarify each point. But in fact, the skills guide design guide says no. Just use, the data you have about, customers in general, or maybe this customer, to make the decisions for them. That is part of the service. That is part of what makes it convenient. That is part of the value of Alexa. They can always correct you if it's not right, but they don't want to make all those decisions. It's hard. So Alexa does it for you. This is not limited, I think, to voice assistants by any means. I think it's just seen more explicitly here. Here's another example of preemptive decision-making from another platform, taken from the files of things that make me crazy, which is when you carefully pick a route on Google Maps to go a particular way, and then partway through your trip, it reroutes you and it doesn't tell you and asks for permission. It's like, oh no, we definitely know that you're going to want to go this way because we think it's faster and more convenient for you. I think I learned this the hard way by ending up driving in the middle of Manhattan after having picked a route that was definitely supposed to go around it. Again, it's doing it in the name of convenience. There is a way to turn it off, but the default is that the platform is going to make these choices for you. And I think typically when the app is having you interact with the real world, it becomes very apparent that it's happened, but much more often this sort of curation of choices and preemptive decision making is happening all the time and we don't realize it. And it's going to become only expanded and more convenient and supercharged with the advancements in generative AI that can make these interactions much more wide-ranging and natural feeling. So the pizza example was from like an earlier generation of machine learning that needed a bit more tight scripting. But with generative AI, that's drawing on large language models that are more powerful, it can now allow voice or chat assistants to draw on absolutely massive data sets on which they've been trained to answer questions, solve problems, engage in conversation, and make decisions of all kinds. In fact, a friend of mine is in Puerto Rico right now for vacation. Didn't know where he wanted to go, just thought somewhere warm, and came upon the Puerto Rico AI vacation planner that helped him plan his trip so quickly, so easily, just by putting in answering a small number of questions that he was sold. It's like, that's easy. I'm going to Puerto Rico, job done. This is the type of service, by the way, that the new version of Alexa, called Alexa Plus, powered by generative AI, is promising. Let's watch an ad to get a sense.
Wow, look at my style. I don't really seen it like this in a while.
Oh, hey there. So we can just talk now. I'm all ears, figuratively speaking. Ooh, do you know how to manage my kids' schedules? I noticed a birthday party conflicts with picking up Grandma at the airport. Want me to book her a ride? Billie Eilish is in town soon.
No way.
I can share when tickets are available in your city.
Yes, please.
Got any spring break ideas?
Somewhere not too far. Only if there's a beach and nice weather.
Santa Barbara is great for everyone. I found a restaurant downtown I think you'd like.
What is Santa Barbara known for?
It has great upscale shops and oceanfront dining.
Can you go whale watching?
Absolutely. Want me to book a catamaran tour?
Wow. What's the next step?
Remove the nut holding the cartridge.
Should I get bangs?
You might only love them for a little while.
You're probably right. Make a slideshow of baby Tina. Mom.
What part am I looking for again?
2-inch washers. Your Uber is 2 minutes away.
For real?
Wait, did someone let the dog out today?
I checked the cameras. And yes, in fact, Mozart was just out.
Wow, look at my style. I don't really seen it like this in a while. Wow.
So I think that this is the type of functionality that people maybe thought they were going to get with the original Alexa, which I think was actually somewhat limited. But here, an example, if you read sort of the whole promotion of it, is if it notices, that your oven is broken, it can say, do you want me to fix it? You can say yes, and it'll take it from there. You know what I mean? It'll go on Thumbtack and find someone who's going to come in and schedule that when they're coming. And if you have an Amazon HELOC. It'll let them in and it'll pay them. I mean, but this is what they're aiming for anyway. Of course, some features are yet to be rolled out. That was fine print, so maybe some things will take longer. So the theme here was making decisions for us, making more of become more of a served self, democratizing this personal service model. I've also written about even just media as a service and how that is kind of about making media easy, right? So now, if you subscribe, media comes to you, you don't have to go to it. And what some of the implications of that are in terms of perhaps making us settle a little more to things that are just convenient for us, like, oh, the show's here, and I paid for it and it's available. I can watch it now. Is the Rings of Power really good? I don't know, but it's on Prime Video. I guess I'll watch it. There's that, and also even just the way the interfaces work. It seems like there's so many options and they're recommending so many things to you. But if you try to then become more of a choosing subject and be like, I want to find a thing, I want this type of thing in search, it's really not set up for that so well. It's like an awkward fit to be a choosing subject in like a served self environment, like a lot of streaming media. As Tim Wu, who's a law professor and coined the term net neutrality, I put it, I think, very presciently in 2018. There is a tyranny to convenience. It's convincing us to cede our data and often our decision power to those who would make our lives more convenient, while the mass personalization of platformized convenience still allows us to feel like unique individuals. Digital platforms like Amazon have democratized personal service in some sense, making bespoke service feel accessible to the average person. But my concern and critique is that the served self is a more individualized and depoliticized way of being a consumer compared to the choosing subject. So overall, there's just less agency involved. If we're thinking about Amazon, we're actually much less likely to comparison shop if we're operating as a served self. The internet, of course, makes comparison shopping easier than it was when we only had physical stores. But there's surprising evidence that we actually often don't do it. More than 60% of Americans' product searches begin on Amazon. And then, of course, there might be hundreds or even thousands of search results for your key terms. But very few users are going beyond the top results. More than 2/3 of product clicks happen on the first page of Amazon search results. And while in the early days, Amazon was very focused on the fit between customer search and subsequent purchase and satisfaction, since about 2012, their search results have been greatly influenced by profit imperatives. So this leads to the massive officially sponsored search results that we now see, not to mention the boosts to products and brands who are in better standing with Amazon because they pay for certain services with Amazon, and the high likelihood that Amazon is favoring its own proprietary brands in these searches as well. And if we're not digging far into our searches, we're gonna we're being nudged towards the decisions that Amazon wants us to make. I mean, interestingly, satisfaction with Amazon's e-commerce service has actually declined, in part because of systemic changes like these, which prioritize paid services from sellers over customer service. But it still ranks remarkably high on consumer trust. And I think this trust and sense of care too easily translate into complacency in the face of the extent of Amazon's powers of governance and its alleged abuses of market power. And the former FTC chair, Lina Khan, has put it, monopolies are bad, not simply because they threaten to, lead to higher consumer prices or even necessarily undermine productivity and growth, but monopolies are bad because they're bad for democracy. And I certainly resonate with Khan's view on this for a number of reasons. One being the way that monopolization over distribution of information constitutes a significant source of political power, as I did with my plagiarized slogan from earlier. Concerns were raised often, but not exclusively on the right, I think, for many years now about the undue influence that tech platforms might have on the circulation of information and therefore public opinion. So concerns about shadow banning and algorithmic discrimination and overly restrictive or just uneven implementation of content moderation in terms of service rules. But I think those concerns kind of seem quaint now in light of Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and then subsequent reinvention of it as X. Although it's lost users and a significant amount of ad revenue, as a literal platform for Musk's political views and an unofficial arm of the Trump administration public relations team, X is a case in point about the risks if too much information distribution rests in one company, perhaps especially one that is privately held since Musk acquired it in 2022. Somewhat similarly, Jeff Bezos' ownership of the Washington Post, which he acquired actually as a private individual in 2013, has gone from an apparent gesture to save the paper of record in the nation's capital from the crisis afflicting journalism everywhere because of the business models and move to digital advertising, to a pretty naked play to shape the paper's editorial stances, ranging from disallowing the editorial board to endorse a presidential candidate in the fall, to now recently saying that the opinion pages will only feature essays touting personal liberties and free markets. Now, the Washington Post is not a platform. It doesn't have the reach of X, but it's a sign of the ways that big tech is taking the gloves off, I think, in terms of openly flexing its political power. And I think the message then is unmistakable. So I think I'm in agreement here with Adrienne LaFrance, who's observed that techno-authoritarianism it's always been in the mix in American big tech, but it's now on the ascent. So this is an idea rooted in the belief of the inherent superiority of tech titans over mere mortals. It resists regulation of any kind. It rejects questions about the ethics or social impacts of technological innovation, and subscribes almost religiously to a belief that technology itself is the solution to any problem. Taken to its extreme by someone like Elon Musk, the solutions of big tech must be questioned by no one and be unconstrained by law. So in light of this, I think we need to be more alert to the seductive nature of platformized convenience and the role that it has played over the years in manufacturing public trust for the large tech brands. Convenience is a technology of subjectification that arguably reflects the techno-authoritarianism at work in Silicon Valley. In plainer English, the ways that we cede our decision power over matters large and small to digital platform companies, including but not limited to revealing our personal data and letting others decide what will be done with it, has two likely effects that are contributing to our current moment, in which American tech brands are consenting to and sometimes even advancing anti-democratic causes in a visible way. On the one hand, the ways that we're seduced by convenience are received as a form of consent by the titans of tech, who point to our participation in these systems as evidence that they are best positioned to decide how technology will shape our society and our lives. I think conveniently forgetting in these moments that the conditions of using most of these tools are not guided by meaningful informed consent, nor meaningful options and choices to negotiate a different kind of deal. So when the FTC brought their antitrust case against Amazon a couple years ago, the company its main talking point was, look how happy Amazon customers are. Look how many Prime members we have. If they're not upset, and then we must be doing something right. There can't be any possible reason for you to regulate us. We've been taking care of our customers, and we've been doing it for 30 years. Secondly, convenience cultivates a habit of mind and a practice which seeds more and more knowing, thinking, and deciding to other seemingly omniscient entities. This habit reduces the frequency with which we exercise our choosing muscles and experience our choices as a form of power, especially when in collectivity with others. Drawing inspiration from French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu's concept of habitus that pays attention to homologies or similarities in how we use our dispositions across domains or fields of activity, the encouragement to be a certain self rather than a choosing subject in the fields of entertainment, information, and consumption may encourage similar passivity in the realms of politics and citizenship. Platformized spaces, I think, are incredibly individualizing, despite the promise of the social that so many platforms espouse. Your feed is different than my feed. The recommendations you see are different than mine. The prices and deals we are offered might differ because digital forms of commerce can make social discrimination easier than in physical space. Convenience logics individualize and isolate us. Just as a small micro example, when Amazon had a brick and mortar bookstore concept, which I visited, where these pictures were taken, I had to look up the prices of the books on my phone. And there's signage saying Prime members get this deal compared to everybody else. So a lot of things about the bookstore were about reinforcing the relationship between me and the customer and the brand, and not so much about the relationship between me and the books, or me and other customers, or me and the people who work there. Convenient digital platformized services have moved certain types of being in public with other people into more private, individualized spaces, with retail and entertainment being prime suspects. So exchange platforms of all kinds for food delivery, video streaming or rentals, ride sharing and house rentals facilitate more distanced and mediated interactions with others. As Lauren Berlant memorably wrote, other people are inherently inconvenient, and digital platforms often help us avoid those sometimes messy or uncomfortable interactions. So I think it's fair to say that the honeymoon is over, though. You might the honeymoon with digital platforms. We might date this in places like the US and the UK to 2016, with the sense that the election, that there have been manipulated information that may have influenced the presidential election or the Brexit vote. We've become more aware of the rise of the platform economy on workers, who are required to absorb the risks in ever-changing algorithmic forms of labor governance, as with rideshare drivers, delivery workers, content creators. It's not news for many of these workers that digital platforms are not always that interested in the agency of anyone other than themselves, which we can see in anti-union tactics, intensive surveillance on the job, and systematic removal of agency moment to moment during work. So that would be true, say, for an Amazon picker, stower, or packer who has a handheld device that tells them what is the next thing that they need to do. They do the thing, they scan it before they even know what is the thing that they'll do after that. As digital platforms consolidate their market power and as investment capital slows down and the cost of borrowing money has gone up, the platforms have also increased the rents that they charge for access to their platforms. So one example here is was important in the FTC case, how rapidly the cut of revenues is that Amazon takes from its third-party sellers, going from 19% in 2014 to 34% in 2021. So this shift in the tactics that Amazon has used to lock third-party sellers into the platform, control their pricing, and make it almost impossible for them to opt out of additional paid services was behind that FTC case. And that's just one of many antitrust investigations we now see in the United States, which itself, the US is quite behind other regions and countries on that. On the consumer side, the honeymoon is over because prices are rising, and the extractive nature of the platform user relation is becoming more apparent, but also harder to resist. So in terms of pricing and having our attention sold, we could look at video streaming platforms have become so much more expensive, and now it's very hard to avoid advertising on most of them. In terms of the data collection piece, just actually recently, Amazon announced that whereas previously with Alexa you could opt to have the recordings of your voice that Alexa is capturing stored just locally, and not go to Amazon central servers. Now they're going to make that very, very hard to choose. If you do, Alexa really isn't going to work that well. They want all the conversations on the central servers to help, to be recorded and saved to be part of the training that's going to make Alexa Plus better and better. So even that choice, which we often don't even have, is going away. I think this example highlights an argument made recently by Mark Steinberg and Joshua Neves that convenience isn't just something we seek out, but something platforms increasingly demand of our relation with them, a condition in which we live. So we live in convenience, as they say. So if the honeymoon is over, that must mean that the hard work begins, as in any marriage. And so I feel compelled to identify, I guess, solutions, which is always a tricky thing, to the power of platforms and the techno-authoritarianism that both inspires and is fueled by them. It's kind of a daunting task, but I want to offer some suggestions. I mean, I think the first thing is to just beware the seduction of convenience. Try to make it less of a default and just a thing that's demanded a way that we have to live in the world now, and really think about the trade-offs or find out about the trade-offs with privacy or agency that make that convenience possible. To look for opportunities to reclaim our agency in matters large and small, even if it's only small ways that we're just flexing that muscle again and remember, oh, this is what it's like to make choices that aren't completely pre-made or curated for me. Notice when the platforms ask us to trust them. That could be in any sort of thing that we're entering into an individual offer of trust, but also the way that the platforms are asking us to trust them to govern things, whether that's governing content, or even now platforms are getting really active in climate issues and saying, yes, we are trustworthy actors in the climate space. You can trust us to do a good job on this, which since generative AI is kind of laughable. Try to locate and demystify the accountability mechanisms for the platforms. Again, won't be easy because a lot of these accountability mechanisms are complicated on purpose. And finally, seek out the inconvenience of other people, whether in online or offline forms, to counter the individualism and isolation of platform convenience. Again, maybe easier said than done, but being aware of the way that convenience actually can make us very lonely, very isolated, and the more time we spend in those spaces, the scarier and more inconvenient other people will seem. But it's really only in collectivity and in solidarity with others that we really do have a hope of pushing back, making changes, and promoting more common sense regulation or approaches to these platforms. I just wanted to briefly acknowledge that I used a bunch of images from a bunch of places in my presentation, and I didn't mention too many academic sources, but these are some of them that I have been inspired by or were thinking about when I wrote today's talk. And I just wanted to thank you very much for coming. I know today might not be the most convenient time of the semester or convenient time of day, so since you gave me your in-person attention, I'm very grateful. I look forward to it.